at 6:33.
Mellon,
Here.
Ponce,
Here.
Castelli,
Here.
Becky, here, Wellington, Yaffe, here, vote. Public hearing.
So the first part of the meeting will be a public hearing, and at this time,
Go ahead. Andy, you come.
Andy will come up and give us a brief update of what we have, and then we can go through public comment.
This hearing is an opportunity for the public to come if there are any people in the public that have any questions about the budget. The amended budget for this year, this is for 2021. It has been on display for 30 days at the district office and also on the district website for the school code. And so that this is just an opportunity for anyone who wants to make any comments on the budget because it has been posted publicly to do so at this time. So,
And we went through that with the board last month,
Yes.
Andy.
yes, there are some minor, the only changes I made to it from what was last month was I adjusted some of the emergency relief funds because it's just a matter of how much is going to be spent this year and how much is next year. So I just made a slight adjustment to that, but everything else is exactly the same.
We have
Public
Anyone?
comments?
on the public comments. Down there.
Okay, then so we'll, the budget will be available for approval on the agenda later.
I think we need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Mellon,
Yes.
Ponce,
Yes.
Castelli,
Yes.
Becky, yes, Yaffe, yes.
35. Now we'll call to order the meeting for tonight. Roll call.
Mellon,
Here.
Ponce,
Here.
Castelli,
Here.
Becky, here, Wellington, Yaffe, vote.
6:35. And do we have anyone present for public comments, citizen comments? No. All right. Brings us to a motion for roll call on the consent agenda.
This is actual vote on acceptance of it.
Right. Sure.
Ponce,
Yes.
Mellon,
Yes.
Castelli,
Yes.
Becky, yes, Yaffe, yes.
Passes. We'll now hear the report from the district, 120 report, starting with the business office.
Andy, you do a quick recap. So Andy's one report is about the amended budget, so that does need to be on the open meeting part, which we're in now. So if there are any additional questions that you may have as board members, now would be the time to bring those forward. If there's not, we would be able to move on to the human resources. Questions from the board? Okay. Next, Shane.
Hopefully mine will be equally quick. So this evening, I'm seeking your review and approval of 3 job descriptions. It was originally 4, but we withdrew 1. The interventionist role needs some additional fine tuning. So the 3 job descriptions that I am sharing with you this evening are the Equity and Community Engagement Coordinator, the Director of Student Services, and then the Director of Public Relations, which is a shared services role. The Equity and Community Engagement Coordinator position, this is a change in title and a tweak in duties. This was previously the parent liaison role, but one of the lessons we learned from COVID is that we can do so much more with the person in that role and their ability to both serve the building and the community. And so we wanted to have a job description that both reflected those expectations but also a title that reflected the degree of responsibility. In terms of the Director of Student Services position, that role was previously at the coordinator level, but that position has served on the building leadership team. We wanted to draw that title again up to in alignment with their peers. It's going to be changing in terms of who that person's supervisor will be for next year. So the job duties haven't changed, but we anticipate there might be some tweaks in the future. But the basis for that change was to get clear alignment with what their role and responsibility is within the district. Then the last one is the director of. Oh, I'm
Sorry, for those two, is this only title changes, right? No salary benefit changes or anything? like that?
Correct. And then the last one is a shared service opportunity. This would be a director of public relations. This position would serve both districts. And as you saw from the language in that, it's going to encapsulate a number of different duties that have been handled by a couple different staff. Those staff are either going to have a diminished in role or are being invited to apply for this on a permanent basis. They were a contract for service previously. So this is another opportunity where we can align our messaging, our visual presentation and communication to the community for the betterment of both districts. Thank you.
So this is one of those opportunities that you have a board to really start to understand and appreciate Jamie DiCarlo. Because in her absence, I get to fill her role right now with being able to describe to you for the Student Services Report to Title I grant. This is an annual approval for the board. The Title I grant is responsible for professional development, supporting students that are in need of more intervention, be able to provide enrichment opportunities for our students as well. In addition to also making sure that we, as a district, are getting community input into the programs that we are operating. So when you look at this summary, typically it's pretty consistent because we have the dollars tied to a lot of positions, people, and those do stay in place from year to year. So overall, what you look at when you look through this document and look at the really fine print that we all probably need to magnify 100 times, we use it for implementing professional development with the Dan Anderson workshop model. That is the model that we use when we're working with our staff and doing evaluations with our teachers. It's part of our push-in support that we have. So those are our coaches that are going into the classrooms and helping students and supporting our staff more as they go through the year. You look at programs that we've put in place, like our Earned Honors. We've continued to develop our Earned Honors program that was implemented through this process, which supported it. Also in there, a big one for us is our equity professional development and what we're doing with our staff and working with our community to make sure we're developing that equity mindset for ourselves. Also that we put in place with this was our co-taught classes. Those classes are predominantly for our students with IEPs, and you have a regular ed teacher and a special ed teacher in the same classroom together working with the students in that classroom. Specifically, what we also do with the money, some more areas, it's our mentoring program. So any new staff member that we have come in, they go through a mentoring program where we have an initial training the first week of school, and then they're assigned a mentor that they have for the next 2 years. So this grant supports that. Also, when you talk about the community involvement piece, where does that come into play and how do we communicate that? So when you start talking about Title I and Title IV, Title III and IV, Title III, you're really looking at like our University of the Padres committee that we have with our families that come in. It's also working through with our summer school, and specifically with our students in EL to help support them with advancing more academically, in addition to looking at the enrichment type programs that we have. And when you start talking about enrichment programs, you go to Title IV and you look at the supplies. So a lot of supplies that we'll get for our fine and applied arts will come from the Title IV grant as we go through each year. So the key part to this is the programs that we've had in place the past 3 years, we've identified as having value in those. In that grant, there's indicators that demonstrate that we are making progress in those areas, which we need to do because it's a federal grant. And as a means of checks and balance, along with our community getting input of what we're doing, we need to provide this to you to be able to go through the grant, say, yes, this is in line what we're doing, and you're also helping hold us accountable. So we are asking that you as a board would approve this. Yes.
Kevin, I wonder if you would, particularly for the benefit of our newer board members, if you could talk about how Title I and CEDAL are kind of work together. I mean, isn't it push through, goes through CEDAL, or we have to somehow work with them in order to get these dollars?
Not with our Title I dollars.
Not with Title I, okay.
So
I get them mixed up.
that was the other one where we would initially have to put in, Andy.
It's actually the idea funds.
There you go. The
Okay,
idea of
gotcha.
Part B flow through.
Okay,
Was used to go, a good chunk of that used to go directly to CEDAL. And this year now it's come back, so we're getting a full amount of our allotment for idea funds coming directly to us. Starting, it's just actually just started this fiscal.
To Laura's point, it would be helpful if you just articulate simply how our Title I funds are, how they determine how much we get. It's
See,
just a
this is one of
quiz.
those areas where you wish you had Jamie here.
Actually,
So we just,
I did the Title I grant writing, so I could.
You wanna
she
speak on
does-
some of that?
Yeah, she does. she
Sure.
kind of do
Come on
things
up.
together. I don't know if I want to. This is quiet. Remember, you didn't want me up here because I would talk too much.
I never said that.
Okay, yeah, so just real quick, what we're looking at today for your approval is the consolidated plan. So Jamie and I we have to write out a whole school improvement plan, district improvement plan, before we can start to work through the grants for FY 2022. So Title I, right, Title I funds are based on, so a lot of times schools confuse Title I funds with only in terms of the number of students who are free and reduced, right? There's more than that. So we look at students who are performing below grade level. So that's a lot of what the funds are allocated to. And then we also have to report the numbers of the students who are considered low income. So it's kind of based on those two pieces. And then the Title I funds are allocated to, a lot of our instructional assistants. We added those, and then all of our academic resource centers, the literacy center and the math lab and those kinds of things. And then there's a lot of other stuff for our students in those intervention classes that we, programs and digital programs and supplies and those kinds of things. So we're able to actually put some of the parent engagement in there as well, because when we're working with parents of the students who are eligible for Title I support, we can also include that in the grant. And then Title II is professional development, Title III, Yale bilingual, and Title IV is kind of community outreach, fine and applied arts. It's a relatively new grant, so it's pretty flexible. Thank you.
thanks.
Don't go too far.
Seems good.
This is gonna be a fun board meeting. I can tell you that.
Cemetery.
That was really good off the top of your head.
I struggle a little bit. But thank you.
We're good with that one? Okay. Next one is then going into the superintendent's report. First topic that we have for discussion is about the school start times. We've been talking about this for some time now. We did have that opportunity to meet with you at the beginning of May. I was able to follow up with the District 75 board also. One thing coming out of that is very clear, both boards do want to see the school start times change. And that is very evident. As we went through the process, it's very similar in the presentation. There are some differences though, because what we have identified and did share with you, we do know the research tells us for essentially students 6th grade and up, it's a benefit to be able to start the school day at a later time than what we currently do. What we also were starting to find out when we did have the survey data come back is that percentage of families that have children in grades 5 and below, there were some concerns in there or expressed concerns that were coming up. Some of it had to deal with bus time. What time do their children need to be at the bus stop? Would the day be longer for them because they need to be in daycare longer for families working? And what ended up happening is we actually had the opportunity to talk with a research team from the University of Rush and started to talk about what research is out there for students in grades 5 and below. And the reality is there's not very much that says whether or not what's the impact if a younger student gets to school later or earlier. So what we started to do then, we engaged with them and what could we do? Because I think one of the things that we've learned this past year through the pandemic is let's try to make sure we have something that's research-based when we're going to make a big change, especially like this. So we have engaged with the University of Rush. They're going to conduct a sleep study for grades K-8, and they are going to branch it up into the high school eventually. I know Anthony was in one of the initial conversations a week or two ago. And the whole idea is to be able to make a research-based decision. And what will benefit us in this is we know then we'll be making a decision what we think is best for all students, K through 8, that go to Mundelein High School from Mundelein. Now, what we also wanted to look at was, and you'd asked this, and we also had the 75 board, what are the options if we wanted to do this anyway? And that's a very real reality for us in that it would cost because we'd have to separate busing, because right now we share buses with both districts. In order to go and run the schedule that was proposed, which isn't the ideal schedule. That's one of the things that I learned going through this. It was what we thought was best for what we could do based on the sharing of buses. But if we were to break that apart and essentially say the high school in Washington, for keeping it easy, would no longer share buses, the essential cost for 1 year would be $117,000 for the high school district and just right around $350,000 for the elementary district. So when we started to think about that in a community lens, that's just over what, almost half $500,000 for our community for 1 year. And when I say 1 year, the reason for that is our bus contract is up this year. We need to go to a bid. So what we'll be able to do is get more information from the Rush research team, be able to compose a bid that has school schedules, K through 12, that we think are the best for all of our students. And that would be part of the bid process. And we know the bus company will be able to support us then with implementing it. Because the one thing that was also consistent was, at least what I heard from boards, we want to do this. And what I'd say here is it would be a pause for 1 year. And the goal and priority would be to establish that and start it August of 2022. And we'd have a pretty good idea of what that would look like after the bids were done. So I know it's not what we ideally thought would happen from a high school level, because there's certainly all the research says it works for kids 9-12. I get the pleasure of being able to try to balance that for 2 districts. Questions, comments?
I'll start off with a couple of thoughts. You said that is the study, have they identified, did you say that they're going to do the K through 8 in the study, or is that all under design still? I don't know.
So they've started, it's really in the beginning parts of the design. The priority right now, Peter, is to be able to adjust K-5.
K through 5.
Yeah.
Okay.
And some of that's contingent on what they know they're going to be able to secure for grants. So they know they can do K-5. They want to ideally make this more of a longitudinal study so that they can track things over time.
Okay. So that would mean obviously it would extend probably longitudinally, which is beyond a year. So that information as it comes in will help us influence our decision. It's not necessarily going to dictate the decision.
Correct.
It's a piece of research that'll help us
Mhm.
advise us. The other part, I like the idea that you called it a community lens. I think that brings us back to that shared services perspective and model. It also allows us to take into consideration that we're not just talking about District 120 that we're representing. We're influencing the lives of many different people. And I think it would be helpful moving forward that when we're in those positions where our decision, although it's focused on D120, could have that type of an impact with District 75, that we need to have more of that community lens offered. When we first hear about ideas like this, I think the first time that we heard about it, it was clear to us that it'd be a good thing. But then some more information was coming up about the reservations that others may have for the other ages. So
One of the things that I know we need to be able to do now that we're going back to more normal procedures and operating as a society, of reinstituting the shared services members. So when we have initiatives like this coming up, minimally getting those board members together from both districts and talking those through more. So we're all much more informed and connected.
And it also seems, even if there weren't shared services, like if we were in a situation where there were not shared services, even what we do at the high school, it can upend the other families that have K through 8, which there's tons of families that have kids in multiple schools.
Correct.
Really did seem like it would be awesome. That last presentation you gave us,
It will be.
when kids would arrive and when they would leave, and shared time for teachers in the morning, that sounded really, really, really nice for staff.
We're gonna get there. I think that's to keep in perspective. We've been trying to do this for what, better part of a decade, Dr. Kroll?
Yeah.
And this, and I said it last time, this is as far as we've ever gotten in this process. And knowing that we are all in agreement, we want to do it, it's gonna happen.
when does that bus contract get renegotiated or discussed?
Well, we're anticipating somewhere in January. Okay. Great. Up next, we have one of the topics that the board last month asked to come back to. It's about our return to in-person learning. So as most of us know, the Illinois State Board of Education did release some guidance that I would applaud. They made it pretty clear. The expectation is for students to be back in the school with really a very narrow defined area for when a student would need additional support, and there would be supported through the current Illinois school code that's in place. So up to present this is going to be Stacy. Who start Stacy and Stevie Wallace, who have, oh no, it's Stevie.
And you're on a roll today.
No. I'm used to everybody being on Zoom. So one of the things, please note in the presentation that you'll see today, we've modified it a little bit, and that we took some of the slides out, so you had a fuller version that you had to go over the weekend. We cleaned it up a little bit for today. So with that, Stacy.
Okay, hi everyone, Stacy Gorman, happy to be here. I was just, and I'll have Stevie introduce herself in a minute, a quick anecdote. So when I pulled this blazer out of the closet today, I was thinking about the last time I wore it was June of last summer. And I was presenting a plan of how we're going to educate kids from our couches at home. So I'm so excited to be here today presenting an entirely different plan. That means our kids are coming back. So very, very happy. So you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Stevie Liebert. I teach choir at MHS. I'm also the VP of the MEA, and I'm also a member of our teaching and learning committee, which is why I'm here today.
Okay, so I'm going to start a little bit with talking about the resolution. You've probably taken a look at this. You received in your board packet, you received kind of an expanded version of this slide deck. That is going to be shared with our staff, and then it will be communicated with our families. For the purposes of tonight, we wanted to be kind of concise because there's a lot here. And so we just want to communicate the most important aspects of the return to school. So this is the exact language of the resolution. What I would like you to focus on is what's in red here, because this took me a while to fully grasp what ISB was saying, right? So what they're saying is remote instruction, okay, will be, and that's full remote, kids are learning from home, will be made available for students who are not eligible for a COVID vaccination and are under a quarantine order by a local public health department. So our understanding of this is even if the child is not eligible for a vaccination, they need to come back to school. And when they come back to school, if they have to quarantine, close contact, a family member who has COVID, so on and so forth, then they will receive that remote instruction. I'll talk a little bit of what some exceptions might be to that towards the second half of the presentation. And so basically what this means is since all of our students, they're over age 12, are eligible for the COVID vaccination, we will require a full in-person return to school beginning August 12th. I think people on the Zoom are cheering at home. I'm cheering in my head. I'm like really excited. Just wanted to put that out there, make it very clear. Are you cheering, Laura? Do you have a
Yeah, I'm
question?
cheering, but I have a question. So eligible, that word, does that have anything to do with students who are eligible because of their age, but maybe because of some health or a religious thing? Does that count as eligible?
So my understanding, and please anyone in the room correct me if I am wrong. So kids who do not have, they're not required, right, to get vaccinated. So they may have lots of reasons why they don't, religious reasons, or you know, they're worried it's not been officially FDA approved, so on and so forth. If there is some type of medical condition, so for example, I know a person and she's not allowed to be vaccinated because she has lots of different allergies and they're afraid she'll have an allergic reaction to the vaccination. So she will not be eligible for it. So they still have to come to school until they're quarantined.
So the
Shane,
key
you want to
is
jump in?
and an underline.
It's the and. I thought it was the or for a while. That was my, like, wait, this
And
can't be
or.
right, but it's and. Shane will,
Yeah, no,
Jump in.
Stacy is correct, that this is being used as an incentive to, one, have as many children over age 12 get vaccinated. But there are going to be a small number of the population that either due to medical fragility or to a religious exemption will not be deemed, not qualify for that. We have the ability to request that information and have that on record. So it should not come as a surprise. We should have that prior to the beginning of the school year or shortly thereafter. But that will be a population that we will have to serve through this alternative program if they fall under a quarantine order.
Can you guys clarify from this statement to the next page, which says what we're gonna do, is there decision making, or is this just the way, is what's our interpretation of this rule here, what all of the schools are going to do?
so that, yeah, that's a good question. I'm reaching out to other Lake County schools, and honestly, we're one of the earliest to kind of put our plan, our full plan out there publicly. Most all of them are right now, the ones I've talked to. Some, you know, there's extreme medical cases. And so this was, I was going to talk about this the second half. There may be a doctor. So we have homebound hospitalization, right? So pre-COVID, everyone comes to school. There are students who are hospitalized, homebound for lots of medical, social, emotional reasons, that kind of thing. And they do get remote instruction. And so that will be a post-pandemic thing as well, right? So a doctor may say, you're not eligible for the vaccination and you are not to go back to school, at least for a semester until we see where the vaccination is going, or for the year. In that situation, we, and Shane and the other people who are not me, would work with the family and the doctor and so on and so forth to determine that student is eligible for, you know, a full semester or full year. In that situation, we would do Illinois virtual school. So that child would be on a full digital program. I'm going to talk a little bit later about what that program looks like. We're very happy with that option for students who need to be out long term. That program doesn't work for kids who are quarantined because they need to stay connected to their regular classroom instruction.
So are people who choose not to vaccinate their child, they're still coming to school?
Yes, they come to
Unvaccinated.
school. They receive remote instruction if they have to go on quarantine.
Mm.
Technically, and this sounds really awful and we're not gonna do this. Technically, the only time that we have to provide remote instruction under the ISB resolution is they're not eligible and they're under quarantine. So if a student a family chose not to vaccinate their child and they went on quarantine, our interpretation is essentially we could just be like, good luck, here's your stuff on Canvas. We would never do that. But there's, so we're trying to give our students the most support that they have, because there's lots of reasons, right, that families choose not to vaccinate their kids. And we need to make sure that we're respecting that and that we're doing everything in our power to ensure that their education continues.
But the quarantine order is coming from a physician or a public health department.
Absolutely. They can't just be like, oh, we think,
We're keeping them home.
which is something Shane's worked with all of your.
Yeah, there's specific criteria as to what type of medical professional can make that recommendation.
The current state, if a student has the last part of school, or maybe even summer school, student has symptoms, that's not a quarantine unless the doctor says so.
Okay, Kevin and I that is be updated all this today.
That's coming out.
Okay.
So try it out.
If they're vaccinated and they have some symptoms, they do not have to quarantine. Okay, I got that part right. He's shaking his head.
We got to monitor for 14
They might, they just make sure they're not running a fever or something. If they're not vaccinated and they show symptoms, they would be quarantined and then they would take COVID tests. And now they're saying the rapid one isn't good enough, right? So you have to take other COVID tests. And then there's probably a doctor in there who they have to give us the COVID test. This is where I'm gonna talk about structural objectives.
We just got the update today, a
Today.
little after 3 o'clock, so.
So should we ask you some more questions?
Please, please, yes, Laura.
So how are we going to record vaccinated versus non-vaccinated?
We can't.
I was afraid of that.
I know.
So the one thing we do know that our nurses will be aware, because any student that has a vaccination is in, I believe it's the eye care system. So they would know, but that's not something we're able to, or they can't share.
Okay.
So we will advise our teachers, our staff, they cannot ask students whether or not they're vaccinated or if their parents support the vaccine. It's so okay. I do like questions. Do you have any more? I can delegate them out. Okay, great. Okay, so Stevie, because she's going to be in the classroom and working directly with teachers through this, she's going to talk a little bit about what that instruction will look like for students who are quarantined. So just a reminder, quarantine would be anywhere from 10 days up to 24 days. So if a household member has COVID, that student will have to quarantine up to 24 days, unless, ISB and the Illinois Department of Public Health change that. And we know like things change like tomorrow, right? So right now it could be 10 to 24 days. So those are the students we're talking about here.
And these are for unvaccinated students.
Yes,
specifically.
thank
So
you.
reminder that if a student is vaccinated, the quarantine does not apply to them. So hopefully most of our students will be vaccinated, and this will be a very small portion of our student population. So for instruction for students who will need to quarantine from home, this is kind of what we're planning to do. ISB highly recommends 2.5 out of 5 hours to be synchronous, where students are able to watch live instruction. We are hoping that our students will still be able to use access via Zoom to Zoom into the classroom. They will be watching the instruction that happens in their classroom, just like their peers are who are in the classroom, but this is not concurrent instruction. We are not going to ask our staff members to stand in front of the camera to interact specifically with those small handful of students that are quarantined. Those students will be watching the instruction via Zoom. They will not be able to participate in the same way that their peers who are in the classroom are, but this is beneficial to them because it doesn't necessarily interrupt the instruction. They're still able to hear the same information their classmates who are in the class are able to hear. The reason that we're doing this is because this helps our teachers in the sense that they don't have to spend time during their office hours, in that 3:05 to 3:25 time after school or during their plan time, interacting with that student individually while they are quarantined to meet that 2.5 minimum recommendation of synchronous hours. The teacher also then does not have to coordinate with a tutor via home hospital to say, here's everything we did in class today, here's the materials, here's what the student needs to do. That student can certainly check in with that teacher to ask questions, get some extra support, just like any student who is in a classroom on a regular day would. But this kind of eliminates a few steps for our teachers and our students in terms of coordinating that synchronous instruction. So once a student moves into quarantine, teachers will have 2 school days after the student has been confirmed quarantined to set up that Zoom for them. So we are not going to say, Stacy is quarantined today, please have your Zoom going, right? We're going to give teachers some time to make sure they're comfortable with the tech. They can ask for help with the tech if they need it. Most of us are pretty gosh darn used to that Zoom by now. So they can have some time to set that up and coordinate with the student, coordinate sending out that private Zoom link so that they can ensure that it is just that student accessing their classroom via Zoom. There may be some classes, band, PE, industrial tech, et cetera, where Zoom is not a possibility, but hopefully that is very minimal.
I just want to add a couple of things to this. I just want to say again, this is not concurrent instruction. Concurrent instruction, our teachers were awesome at it, and our students, real troopers. I don't know that it's an effective model for student learning. So in working with Dean and Stevie as the president and vice president of the MEA, I'm very proud to say that we are all on board in making the best student-centered decision. So ISB does require this resolution that students don't fall behind in their education, which is what we fully support. So students will Zoom in. And what does this look like? Can they, participate in gallery walks around the room or do small group? That would be very difficult. But when you think about the board meetings that we run, Lisa, I think I saw you Zoom in one time for the board meeting, right? People were here, she was at home. She was a part of the whole meeting. She was able to participate, when they said, hey, Lisa, but you are part of this. And so that's what's really important. We think of math, right? And the teacher is at the board delivering an overview of those problems. The student, it's important, the student will hear all that and see all of that. And so we've actually, we were talking about this at the department chair meeting a couple weeks ago, and we had a department chair who was on Zoom, and people were like, well, will this make a difference? Will the student really, is this effective? And Kim Goldberg, she turned her camera off, and honestly, I kind of forgot that she was on Zoom, and she said, this is precisely what I'm doing, and I just talked to you all when you asked me to participate, and I've heard the whole meeting. So I do think it'll be an effective method. And Lisa, in terms of what you asked compared to other schools, there are several other schools in the county that are not offering the Zoom in option. It's not required. And so again, I think the leadership of the MEA for working with us to make a good decision for the education students. So I just wanted to add that.
And real quick, just on the flip side, while some aren't even offering Zoom, we also have other districts that have the ability to offer a lot more, where they're going to keep some concurrent potentially going, where they're going to maybe look at redoing their policies. That's not what we're bringing you today. This is what we believe is best for us.
So Canvas will be a really big tool that we are continuing to use throughout the school, COVID or no COVID. Canvas will certainly be really helpful for students who are quarantined. Teachers know that their course materials need to be accessible via Canvas. So quarantine students will have that same access that students who are in person in the classroom do. They'll have the schedule that they can see each day. So they know exactly what's happening in the class. They know what to listen for. They know what assessments are coming up, etc. So that is something that we will continue to use and has been a really positive way for our students to engage digitally, to have some consistency throughout all of their courses, all teachers are using the same platform. So that will certainly help support our students who do need to quarantine next year.
And we did survey students at the end of the year, and Canvas was something that they actually said was very helpful, which was good to hear.
In terms of progress monitoring, like I mentioned, teachers will of course do some individual checking in with students who do need to be quarantined. Just like we would for any student who is in person, who may need a little bit of additional support, right? We can make phone calls home. We can work with those students individually via Zoom or via phone or via email, whatever they need to find success while they are quarantined. Students will certainly have formative and summative assessments administered by the teachers when necessary and appropriate when they are quarantined. And IEP and 504 case management teams can certainly provide some more support for students who do qualify for IEPs or 504s as necessary.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Real quick. So, and I don't want to get too far into the weeds, so you can tell me to stop, but if you're quarantined and you are unable to attend school in person for 10 or 11 days, are you then to be considered eligible for like a homebound plan?
Yeah, so it's interesting, and I had to really study this to understand it. ISB passed this resolution under the current homebound hospitalization policy umbrella, right? So essentially, yes, this resolution is coming out of that because homebound hospitalization is anything more than 10 days, we have to provide, right? The kind of remote learning or homebound, it's been done lots of different ways pre-pandemic. So yes, and it's even anticipated. So if a student is in the process of taking a test and we're anticipating it, what we're doing with that is we have a couple of options. We could throw it under a homebound hospitalization plan, traditionally like we've done before. But what this has been is a tutor, hiring a tutor, okay, one tutor for maybe sometimes multiple subject areas, or trying to find multiple tutors that's working with the student in the evening or sometimes during the day, and they're not getting that direct instruction from their teachers. And so we feel that this option is much better than the traditional home hospital plan that most schools have done. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, I just, yes, that makes sense.
In terms of these, you might be thinking of these students with individualized plans. So their case manager will be involved once they go in quarantine. They also have IEP teams, and they have individual 504 case managers. So they will work with their teachers. We've talked a lot with Jamie about this, but they will work with their teachers to make any modifications necessary for that remote time period. So that is very similar to a home hospital plan.
Oh yeah, I'm thinking of, talk about a flashback of your blazer. Back when we were here last year, we were talking a lot about how do we access and reach those students with more significant learning challenges. And due to COVID, it exacerbated those situations. Now we have students, hopefully a small number, that may not be able to attend in person. And then that once again exacerbates some of those needs and requires that specialized support. So just keeping that in the back of my mind as we move forward.
So one of the things that we're going to go to the board tonight, but we're finalizing the job description. So we are going to hire an interventionist and 2 additional instructional assistants through the ESSER, the CARES Act funds. I would like to hire potentially a few more people. Yeah, let's put the money to good use. But you're exactly right. We will be using some of those folks to help kind of case manage the students who are in quarantine. So that's different. Students with IEP and 504s, they have a whole team that's going to be monitoring them. My concern, right, is students who are under quarantine who do not already have these individualized plans. And so we will be having the instructional assistants and the interventionists kind of manage them and make sure that they're keeping up. That's in addition to working with their classroom teacher every day. So that's something I'm really excited to bring to the board soon, because I think that'll be really helpful. Yeah.
I feel like for math specifically,
Yes.
this is really good. Not the concurrent, not a fan.
Right.
But even if I'm at home and you're teaching algebra, at least I might not be able to participate all 50 minutes, but at least
Right.
I'm getting the meat
Yes.
of the new material as
Yes.
best I can.
Yes, yes. Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about semester or year-long alternatives. So if there is a student's medical provider says they just can't come back, they're ineligible for the vaccination and it's too much of a risk and they're going to be out the whole school year or maybe half of the year, we need a long-term option. And putting a student in a class and having them watch the class on Zoom each day and navigate all those pieces is not going to be effective for the child. So what we would like to do is have students do a program called Illinois Virtual High School. So we have worked, and Stevie's going to take over a little bit in terms of the instruction. We have done a lot of different full online digital programs for students who are recovering credits. Stevie has been through all of them. And so what we love, and we'll hit some of the highlights of Illinois Virtual School. But what I love about this is one, it's ISB's stamp of approval. So when you go to ISB's website and you're looking at kind of remote digital instruction, Illinois Virtual School is on there. So it is kind of the Illinois State Board virtual program, which is really good. And then I want to talk about a couple other pieces that there also went into our decision making. All teachers are certified in their contents area. So on most types of, we have Edgenuity, credit recovery, credit acquisition. You have a teacher who's helping the student pace and set goals and check-ins and those kinds of things. But this one is you have a teacher who's an expert in that content area working with the student remotely. So they do, I actually talked with a teacher a few weeks ago who's teaching economics. So he meets with kids regularly via Zoom. They email back and forth pretty consistently throughout the week. He sends progress reports home because Illinois Virtual, you can pull this out to their parents every week and to the school, which I think is really great, right? And we will have some people kind of case managing these students who will be at home. And so that was the biggest seller for us, is that there is a certified teacher who's an expert in the content area working with the student on the virtual class. So one of the things that you may be thinking is, well, are students going to get the courses that they absolutely need, or the courses they want? So what I had the department chairs do is if you want the 150 different courses, I can send them to you. But I had the department chairs go through their area and make sure that one, in the graduation required courses, are they all there? Two, what are the honors and AP courses available? And then three, are there at least, kind of a menu of electives that students could take? Will they have all the electives that we have? They don't. And so this is, online PE is going to look a little bit different from what we have, but they even have world language. And so we're very happy with their course offerings. It is very much aligned to our course guide. We also love this, 96% student completion rate, very excited. And then if we do have students who are part of sports, it is, all courses are approved by NCAA. Stevie's going to talk a little bit about the curriculum and instruction for this.
So as Stacey mentioned, the courses are asynchronous. So there is not an expectation for IVS instructors to meet at a specified time with a group of students and give them direct instruction. This is mostly because a lot of these IVS instructors are teachers in their full-time gig during the day. So just like any of us in our jobs, we are not necessarily available to do our nighttime gig during the day. But there is a lot of really excellent course material made available for students. All of the courses are aligned to Illinois state standards, and teachers have created flipped videos for students to watch and receive instruction. There are discussion boards online where students go in, the teacher posts a question and the students have to write a response. And looking at some of the sample courses, this is really similar to what I experienced in undergrad when I had to take a few gen ed courses online over the summer to try and wrap those up quickly. So it really is some really good programming for something that is online. We have had a few MHS students who have used IVS because of their medical needs, and anecdotally, they have said that it really was good instruction for something that was virtual and really prepared them for collegiate level education, which is excellent. So a big difference between IVS programming and a program like Edgenuity, which is what we currently use for credit recovery, is that there is that teacher assigned to the course. So for example, in our credit recovery sections, I teach one section of credit recovery. My licensure is in music, and I have a classroom full of students who are recovering credit. So in a course that they've taken but didn't pass, in all sorts of different content areas. I'm not a content area expert there. I can do my best to help them, and of course I do, but these teachers who are assigned to these IVS courses are always communicating with students to help them, and they have that expertise in the content area, which is really excellent. They conduct regular check-ins, hold office hours, and are available by appointment, like Stacy said, via Zoom, via email, etc., which is great. Coursework and assessments go beyond multiple choice to include written assignments such as essays for English and social studies, which we love because we don't always see that in online programming. So this is something that's really important to us, that our students who are not able to attend in the building have an experience that is most similar to what they can have when they are in the building. IVS instructors have a timeline in which they're expected to give feedback. I believe it's like 3 days after a student submits work, so that students are getting timely feedback and are helping actually build those skills to be ready for the next level. For lab classes like science, students are given lab kits so that they can have those hands-on activities. It's not just all through the screen. They also sometimes will need a textbook or other materials just depending on the class. Like I said, virtual discussion boards with a cohort model with their peers. It's a really great way that students are able to still engage in that education while they are not in the building. IVS does give us the opportunity to align their calendar with ours. So when a student knows that they will be remote for a long period of time, we can have IVS set up their course so that their semester is running at the same time that ours is, so that that student has the opportunity to finish at the same time that their peers would. Everything is aligned and very nice. Any questions about the IVS instruction and curriculum?
IVS has been around.
Yes.
Since the 90s, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And we talked to some of our parents, we've always gathered feedback from our, our students and parents who've used IVS, and very complimentary of it. And even in terms of, the executive functioning and the independent learning that they were able to gather, but then the feedback and direction from the content area teachers. Okay, so I may have to get a different color blazer to be back here for a new plan, but let's hope not.
We have 13 of them.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
A couple actually. So now we're looking at bringing all the students back. Do we anticipate having all of the teachers?
That's a great question. Yeah, and Shane can take this one. I'm just gonna let Shane take this one.
Wow.
The short answer is yes. Obviously, if a staff member has a medical condition, we would work to try to find an accommodation for that. But since we are not having any positions that are going to be remote, we will be providing those accommodations within the building.
So, yeah, there will not be a bunch of kids sitting in a classroom on their computer while the teacher's on the smart board. We won't be able to accommodate. They maybe there's other things or FMLA or whatever. The one thing though that I was actually thinking about today was we have, we can't ask if the teachers are vaccinated or not vaccinated, but we may have some teachers who are not vaccinated. And then if they have to quarantine, I think that the information that came out from ISB and Illinois Department of Public Health today said that the staff would maybe only need to be out 7 days rather than 10 or maybe 24. And that's really exciting because that would be 5 days only of daily instruction that we have to work through And a lot of our classes are co-taught. We have instructional assistants, a lot of those. So we would be able to still deliver instruction in that time. But that was one of the things that I was thinking about.
And we do have a pretty good vaccination rate for our staff. So that will minimize the need to quarantine.
So this is the direction we want to be going, for sure. And there are things we have put into place like Canvas and Zoom and all sorts of stuff. If it's not a fun thing to think about, but if there's some other second wave or there's new direction or that sort of thing, is there anything we should be doing now for contingency planning for next year for the just in case scenario? And that's not where your head is.
I'm gonna turn that one to Kevin. I'm still coming off the year. I can't think about another pandemic.
Well, I think the quick answer is, we have a protocol in place, because what would happen would be what? A second wave of potential COVID. So we'd have to enact what we already have in place. We have our e-learning plan already adopted. Our students already have a one-to-one device. So we've been through it. We would know what to do. We'd enact that right away.
We have, I mean, protocols and communication and all the stuff that we would need to turn on a dime.
Yeah.
Unlike March 13th of last year, we had 48 hours to reinvent education.
Yep.
It's horrible. But yeah, actually, I mean, seriously, to your point, we have been constantly reflecting, talking with our departments and our teachers, and we surveyed kids and got feedback. There are things that we could improve, and we've gathered information. So, you know, there's always changes that we could make if, you know, there was another wave.
Okay, let's not think about that anymore.
Yeah.
When you think about it, you have a really good playbook set,
We do.
because you just did that.
I mean,
experience.
so many times.
Right? So-
Yeah, we have like 10 playbooks, right?
Right, right,
We have one for
The most
any remote
recent one.
plan you could imagine.
right.
Sorry. Kevin's just like, please get her off the stage. Okay, anything else?
Thank you again
Thanks.
for everything you all have done.
It's been fun. I mean, who
The
can
other
say
side
that
of
they
it.
were an administrator during a pandemic? Right?
Fun.
Only the lucky few.
For the
That's remote.
district report.
No, so up next on the district report, it's the restorative restart plan. Dr. Kroll and Dr. Herman will present this. This is also a follow-up topic that was discussed at the board meeting last month.
Hello.
Hi.
So I'm Jessica Herman. My role is our Systems of Support Coordinator at Mundelein. And so part of that, a lot of that role is kind of ensuring that we have the systems in place to support students academically and socially emotionally. And so there's a lot of that, you know, as we were just talking about, there's a lot to consider right now. And so Dr. Cohen and I will be talking about what we're thinking and what we're planning for supporting all of our students as we welcome them back in the fall. Oh, thank you. And so part of this, in order to kind of be really proactive and intentional, we need to slow down and reflect, right? I just thought about what this past year and a half has brought us and kind of what we've all been experiencing. And so everybody's been through a lot of changes, a lot of collective trauma. We have students who've lost family members. Just looking at our incoming freshmen, we have quite a few who've lost family members over the past year. You know, we've had families losing unemployment. We've had some basic needs, you know, challenged in terms of families needing food from our food banks. And then just our day-to-day schooling has been very different, right? Having a lot fewer students in the building at any given time, small, you know, seeing very few students in classes and navigating the hallways. We've definitely understandably seen a decline in, you know, students participating in clubs and activities and sports. And then of course, the majority of our students have been experiencing school on the computer and, you know, through their houses. And so there's just a lot of like day-to-day lifestyle changes that students have gone through that it will be a big adjustment to come back into a building with a bunch of people and kind of navigate school again. So there's a lot to consider in terms of looking forward. And so thankfully we do have, there's a lot of guidance. You know, we've been referring to the ISB guidance. A lot of the professional organizations around school-based mental health professionals have also been providing guidance. So prior to my role here, I was a school psychologist, and NASP is our association, and they have a lot of awesome resources. They partnered with the American School Counselor Association to provide a lot of guidance, just in kind of what to consider to support student mental health. And so they offer this new set of working assumptions, just that, you know, regardless of kind of what a student's experience was, everyone has experienced change. Everyone has experienced a disruption to kind of what they knew prior to the pandemic. There's a lot of, you know, varying emotional reactions, diminished stamina in terms of kind of work time and what it looks like to be kind of focused on a task for a while. And then simply, you know, quite simply, not all homes have been safe places for students. And so given all of this, you know, we can see different kind of manifestations in students in terms of how they're acting in school, what their needs might be. And so these organizations have provided a lot of guidance around kind of how can we be proactive and how can we kind of look at all of our people in our building to ensure that we're providing kind of school-based, school-wide supports and not just relying on like individualized supports for students. So we asked our students, Stacey alluded to our survey, we asked our students to kind of share their reflections on this past year and also just looking ahead. Oh, I skipped one. So we just gave it the last like week of school. We had over 1,000 students complete it. So over 800 students or almost 800 students that are returning. And then a lot of our incoming freshmen. And so when asked to kind of look back on the year, the majority said, 80% said the year was about what they expected or better. So that was positive. I think, you know, after the disruptions last year, we kind of set the groundwork for what the school would look like. And so even given all of the schedule changes, students were, at least it was kind of what they were anticipating. We asked what has been most helpful. And the three themes that really emerged were these, teachers, grace, and flexibility. Students wrote things about, my teachers have been so understanding. They've asked me how I'm doing. They've, you know, playing music. They're giving me a lot of flexibility with assignments, individualized help. There was a lot of comments around that. They also mentioned Canvas being really helpful in kind of organizing all of their classes in one place, all their assignments. And so that's something that we've learned that will be continuing next year. And they also talked about the block schedule and the late start. There were a lot of students saying having fewer classes in one day was helpful and getting more sleep was helpful. So, you know, as we talked about, that could be a future conversation as well. So we asked kind of, how are you feeling about next year? And, you know, knowing you're coming back into the building. And the vast majority we're feeling positive. One good thing about this survey, we did collect student ID numbers and names of our incoming freshmen. So we'll be able to use this for a lot in terms of identifying individual students. Some kids wrote, hey, I really hope to meet with the social worker the first week. We'll be able to provide all of those kind of targeted supports. We asked students, how confident do you feel you will be successful in math, science, English, social studies? And the majority said they were not sure or they'd be confident. There were very many students that said, I will not be successful. So that was good to see. And again, we have the names of those students who don't feel they'll be successful. So we are able to kind of, you know, track those students, kind of monitor them and provide supports in the fall. We asked kind of, what's some topics? What are you kind of concerned about, you know, connection to school, staying organized, just like a variety of topics that students kind of rated. And these are some that they were not concerned about. Over 60% said they were planning to get involved in a sport or activity. They were not really concerned about that. They weren't really concerned about staying healthy or keeping families healthy, which is very different from where we were a year ago when our survey results said a lot of students were like, hey, I'm worried. How do I keep safe? How do I stay safe? So, you know, we've come a long way in terms of what we know about how to stay safe. And it seems like our students are feeling more secure in those areas. Their top concerns, and so this is really helpful for us as we plan to kind of know where their minds are right now, knowing that they will change over the summer. Everything will change, but this is kind of their kind of status at the moment. There's just kind of a general concern about just general uncertainty. You know, a lot of students wrote, I'm not quite sure. I haven't been in the building for a long time. I'm just kind of nervous. A lot of our freshmen and current freshmen, or just finished freshman year and incoming freshmen, said they don't know how to get around the building, so they're worried about just like getting to their classes. The other two were navigating the course load. So students acknowledging I'll have more courses in the day, I'll have more homework probably, and so some anxiety around how to kind of navigate that. And then managing stress and anxiety was another thing students commented on, not being, feeling just like that this might be a challenge for them next year. So knowing all this, we're just thinking about how can we acknowledge where students are, what we've been through. And so Dr. Cole will talk about kind of what we're doing to provide that kind of setting to be restorative with our students.
So certainly after the context of the last year and a half and the excitement of coming back to school, we certainly don't want to just forget about what people have gone through. We do want people to come back, though, supported, connected, and prepared. And so ultimately, that's our overall goal for starting the school year. Like a really rigorous video game that just is not going the way you want it to, and sometimes you don't like what happens, you're just going to hit that button of restart. And so we actually nicknamed this the restorative restarts at the very beginning, because we wanted to kind of acknowledge that we are all coming back to school. It's something that we're familiar with, but we don't want to forget what we've gone through. We want to acknowledge that, be able to support people as necessary, and really enjoy coming back. And so there's actually three parts to the restorative restart. First is that connection, reconnecting with each other, reconnecting with our school. The second would be to reestablish those healthy school habits. We'll talk a little bit about what that is in a minute. And overall, having an institutionalized wellness approach to the entire year. Okay, so there are four parts to this restart that we've initiated at this point. We have subcommittees that are working on different components of this. Now, there's some parts of this that they're not new. For example, we're putting together plans for how we're going to re-engage students with activities, athletics, and just the community itself. We do that every year, but the intent here is just to have that mindset, like we don't want to take anything for granted. We want to make every moment count. We want to make it a little bit more special because it's the first time we've been together as a whole group for over a year and a half. As well as we've worked very rigorously with our staff to reinforce making relationships and building community. That's something that we'll continue to do. There's an added piece there where we are going to bring forth restorative justice, and just to define that the way we're looking at it right now, because we want to make sure we're very, very specific. In instances where there's wrong between two individuals, for example, a crime or an incident, where a victim and a perpetrator, all of those people involve a collaborative effort of how to resolve that issue and make it not so that it's an exclusion or isolation at the end of it. We do that very often in our dean's office. There are some places in our classrooms that it happens, but not universally. And so that's where we want to bring it forward. And we want that to happen in our classrooms as well as any other part of our building. And so building staff development as we go through the year for restorative practices and suggestions on how to implement that in your different ways of the building. We are working on different plans on how to get kids back in those positive school behaviors. We have students who have not had a discussion, at least half of our school will not have had a high school discussion in class. It's going to be different than what they may have experienced in the middle school. And so we need to know that going into this, that we can't just take that for granted. Timeliness, time management, organization skills, all things that we probably have a detriment just because of the fact that we were isolated and online. So those are the things that we're going to have to put back into practice. And then finally, many of us have heard from our school community in different ways. My personal experience were conversations and letters from students about how, as the school year transitioned, things that made them stressed, gave them a lot of anxiety, and how that bothered them. And how are we going to handle this in the future? That issue of mental health and how to work through your mental health and be supportive of that is something that we have as a key component of this plan as well. And so you'll see some social emotional lessons that are being built into this. And so as we started the conversation with our staff about the restorative restart, we kept the tagline, first day, first week, first month, first semester, all year. And that's how we've approached the planning for this restorative restart. So here's an example. First week of school, staff report back on the 11th, Wednesday 11th. We'll have some staff development components to that, but that is, that's kind of the anchor of that week. Always before staff return, we have freshman orientation. So we're planning on our freshman orientation as we always have, and that's a variety of events. There's a lot of community building that takes students from 5 different feeder schools and make them all Mustangs. And so we're anticipating being able to do a lot of those plans as we have in the past. However, our sophomore class did not have that opportunity, and we want to offer that to them as well. And so that day before staff report, we will have some type of freshman and sophomore orientation program for that day. That is very anxiety producing for students to come to the school for the first time with people that they never have met before. They might know they'll know their friends, but there's a lot of other people they don't know. And so we rely on our parents to offer that support as well. And so the night before, we offer a meeting where our parents of new students, so in this case, it'll be our freshman and sophomore parents and transfer students, to come in and ask, we present them with some logistical situations, and then we open the floor and they ask tons of questions. We get it all out. How to put money on your ID so you can buy food in the cafeteria. Activity box, where do you get it? How do you do it? Supplies for each class. Lockers, where do you go for that? What if you have a problem with your locker? And then school expectations, phone rules, things of that sort. All that gets talked about with the adults the night before to help conversations that night with their students before the next day and before the first day of school on Thursday and Friday. When students report to school on Thursday and Friday, our goal there is twofold. Number one, we are asking your staff to work on community building and getting to know each other rather than diving into curriculum those days. We want to start to rebuild, reconnect. When those 2 days, we'll have 2 things that we typically do. One that we typically do and one we don't do at this time of year. We always have a back to school assembly. Usually we have it the first Friday, but we're going to try to do that right away. The second thing that we want to do is an event that we do for the class of nights in January with our incoming students, our prospective incoming students. That's when all our athletes and all our clubs are in the main gym. There's students there, there's activity advisors and coaches there, and students roam, sign up, talk, ask questions, and look at everything that they possibly can get involved with. We're going to recreate that, not just for the freshmen and sophomores, but for the entire school on in one of those 2 days too, because the intent there is to remind them of all the ways that you can be involved and be reconnected. So first day, first week. Go ahead.
Anthony, you're having the link crew be there on the 10th, is that right?
Yes, link crews are a major force for that event
Okay.
for freshman orientation.
And they're already reaching out to the students at this point,
So
or?
that is one of their protocols. They get trained in the summer, and then about a week, a few days before freshman orientation, that's part of their protocols. That they have an assignment of a few freshmen, 10 freshmen, and they're calling all them. We're going to be actually adding the sophomores to that list too. Good question. So first day, first week, as staff get into the second week, it's understandable that they're going to start getting into the curriculum. What we're asking as well, though, is that we don't want to leave those community building, those relationship building activities alone, that they should be seated along that week and into the future weeks to continue that process. We don't want one to start and the other one to end, right? We need to have some done at the same time in order to continue this process of community building. The piece that I wanted to lead to is how will this go past the first week, into the first month, into the first semester and onward. And we have a committee who has worked on addressing who we are, the wellness, the humanity, and the opportunities that we have in our school, and the social emotional lessons that are tied to that. And so this committee has already started to orchestrate very well what things they're going to focus on during certain months of the year. This may make this very specific. This is not just for classroom teachers. This is for coaches. This is for secretaries. This is for security personnel. Everyone who interacts with our students has an ability to have these same conversations with students in some form or fashion during those times. And so we're just bringing to light, we're hosting certain things at certain times to have that as a focal point. Doesn't mean it has to stop them. It just means that that's the focal point of those particular months. So we're going to start the year with who are we? It's good to be a Mustang, the Mustang way. And so we'll focus then on specifics such as how to do school, resources and support, connectedness, norms and expectations. Very typical start of the school year things. As we get to the middle of the semester, towards all the way to the holidays, we start to discuss wellness, increasing positivity, positive aspects of stress, eating healthy, exercise, decision-making, gratitude, all very, very good lessons that anybody in our building can have a conversation with. Our committee will be seeding those methodologies with our staff before that month starts, so that our staff has the support to do that type of thing. As you go into the new year, humanity, looking at enhanced personal relationships, empathy, understanding differences. And then finally, the ending of the year, looking at opportunity. How can you support your community, looking beyond high school, serving the community in the world? This is also typically, I'm looking forward to this coming back. I haven't heard that it wouldn't, but Mundelein would typically do it towards the end of May, are the cleaning, the cleanup on Mundelein. And so that's where a lot of our students would do volunteer work. This would be something that could be a part of that element. I'm assuming that that's going to come back. I'm hoping it does, because it's been a really good resource for us. So that is the intent. That's how we want to take this from day one all the way through the entire year. And so with that, I'm going to be able to, I think both of us, Jessica and I, can help answer any of your questions.
I really appreciate the thinking, the attention, and the leadership that you're demonstrating here about thinking holistically about what we're up against. Thank you. I am wondering about parents and students who are having anxiety leading up to that first week. Is there anybody here? Are there resources if parents wants to call and say, hey, my student's experiencing anxiety about coming back? Is there anybody that can receive those calls before we start?
So actually, we do get a few of those phone calls. And so what happens is that we are typically offering individual tours. And in that tour, you're obviously having a conversation to help talk about those issues that might be adding some additional stress to your transition. So we have done that. We will continue to do that. We will be offering, I typically send my back to school letter around the end of July, beginning of August. August 1st usually is my deadline. And that comes with your parent calendar. In that I would be also offering, that type of opportunity. And then we offer, but usually if that's the case in a home, people are calling us for that impromptu. So we'll be doing that.
Do we have other ways for new or expanded ways to identify students who are suffering from anxiety and depression and all of those things you mentioned earlier? Is it the normal ways of finding them, or do we have additional ways?
I have an answer, but I don't know if I can answer it.
Sure, I'll start. Yeah, so this past year, we did start, we developed, more avenues for students to reach out, and for teachers. So rather than only waiting for students to kind of come to our, school-based mental health professionals, we have sent out survey. We did it 4 times this year. That all students we did it twice that in the classroom to make sure many students did it. And it was like a few questions just saying, do you need to talk with anyone? And how are you doing right now? And so if students said they're not doing very well, but they didn't want to talk, we still checked in. And we plan to continue those next year. And we have quite a few students who built a relationship based on that. They didn't kind of take the step to go walk to an office or to sign into a Zoom. But when given the opportunity on the survey, they were like, yeah, actually I'm not doing so well. And then they built that relationship. And we've also have a pretty robust conversation or process of articulation with our middle schools. We've gotten a lot of information about our incoming freshmen and kind of their supports, their needs. And so part of our committee, this is a lot of the school-wide work, but this summer we're also talking about how to best support students who we already know are struggling a lot. And so what can we do in terms of inviting students in for smaller group conversations? What can we do the first week to make sure everybody is kind of checked in with, and so that we're going to students more, because we did find that a lot of students just weren't, logging into an office hour. So we needed to go to the students. So that was one good learning, I think, from this, that we want to continue those kind of pulse surveys that we did.
Thank you for that.
This just really excites me because, this to me is the positive that has come out of the pandemic, is that we're a little bit more enlightened. And I think that this could be a blueprint for what we do every year. And I can see so many ways that students could really be more successful when they feel like they matter enough that this is happening. So yeah, I really appreciate that this is, what you guys have come up with. Really, it's very positive.
I think it looks awesome. I really do. And when you think about it, it's your first slide. I was getting heart palpitations myself, because when you think about it, half the kids haven't even been here. Your seniors were here for a year and a half.
Yeah.
It's just, it's very thoughtful.
It just all the anxiety just entering into the world again,
And
just even going to a store for any of us, right? And so knowing the students are experiencing that.
And I don't know if this helps, Lisa, but in my experience, just over the past year, I feel like every teacher that interacted with my daughter, it was always, how are you? Was asked for. I don't know if that was a directive from administration but that's the vibe I got, as teachers were very tuned into how are you, what's going on. That was what was asked first.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Up next, then, we have the update on the aptitude assessment. So we have Mr. Bunick and Mr. Calhoun coming forward to share with you some of the things we have currently been doing. And then the other assessment, new sciences follow-up from the discussion with the board last month also. So with that, Tom, please.
Good evening. I'm Tom Bunick. I'm the Department Chair of Guidance. Welcome new board members. I haven't met any of you yet. So my piece here is to give you a little bit of background on what we do in guidance as far as introducing students to careers, helping them identify their interests and their strengths, and how we use that in course selection and post-secondary planning. And then Larry will talk to you about a new exciting aptitude test that we can add into the mix to really now identify not only the students' interests and their strengths, but then their aptitudes, and kind of put that all together and helping the students make their best decisions. So just a little background on developmental guidance. We just finished our 4th year of our 8-period day. And when we were on that block schedule, we had a lot more time available to us because there was a homeroom period every day. We did lose a little bit of that time when we went to the 8-period day, but we were able to get into the classrooms 3 times a year. And we are taking up some instructional time from those classes. And so freshman year, we go into biology, sophomore US history, junior English, and senior year, we get into PE. And we do that 3 times a year. And we present these lessons, mostly in 9th and 10th grade. There's a lot of logistical stuff that we cover the first time we meet with the freshmen, let them know that high school's for real. You have a transcript now, grades are important, you have to earn credits, and then talking about roles of the counselor and their student support team. And then we get into that first time logging them into Naviance, which is our college and career program that we use. Through that, we get them into what's called a cluster finder, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. And it's really just a quick survey of likes and dislikes that students do to help them kind of see what a career cluster is. There's 16 national career clusters, and this is their first exposure to that. So they can see based on a survey kind of what I might be interested in based on how I answer these questions. And it'll get them into a cluster, a career cluster that then they can explore a little bit deeper. Okay, so we start really broad, and then we start to narrow it down as we go through each grade level. When we get to grades 11 and 12, it really starts focusing on that post-secondary planning. We talk a lot about state testing coming up, and we start talking about post-secondary planning and what they can do. We don't just talk about college, we talk about all the options that students have available to them after they graduate Mundelein High School. So I'm not going to read this to you, but just real quick. In the 9th grade, we do that career cluster finder. Again, we try to do this right before course selection. So it's in students' minds and they're fresh when they get that course guide and they start talking to their parents and their teachers about picking their courses for the following year. So again, that's our first introduction to those career cluster finders. Later that spring, we do an interest assessment. This is research-based on Holland Code, which is the RIASEC, and it kind of gives them a little bit more deeper understanding of what they might be good at and what they might be interested in, okay? When we get back into 10th grade.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Sure.
So you do that with the students in the fall and the spring. When is it discussed with them? Is that the same time frame?
So the cluster finder we use right into the course selection process when we meet with the students.
You do, okay.
Yes. The interest profiles, as we do it in the spring, won't be used by us until the following year.
And then that's something that just gets done during their guidance appointment?
Correct, yes. So outside of these developmental guidance lessons, we have targeted meetings with students that we talk about. These are the things you will cover with the students. And part of that is what we're taking out of Naviance. Over the years, we've had about an 85% success rate with students getting into those programs and completing them. And if the counselor is meeting with a student, they haven't done it yet, we ask them to please get in there and do that. Make sure they can log in and that they can do that.
As a parent, I've seen Naviance, but I haven't seen those other things. Is that typical, or the parents don't have visibility?
So usually parents get more involved in Naviance as their student moves through the high school, and they now, because we do, what's nice about Naviance is that all the data is stored in there, but parents usually dig in when it gets to that college planning, because we use this all for all of our college planning. And students will notify us through Naviance of their application process and all that stuff. And then we as counselors will send all of our documents electronically through Naviance to all those universities. So it's probably very typical that you don't get into later on. I think it's something that we can improve on, is trying to get more communication out to parents to look into that and see that. Most recently, Navient has given better access to parents. Prior to a few years ago, you'd have to have a separate parent account that we would have to pay for to do that. And we weren't doing that at the time.
But we would be able to see these things too.
Sure, absolutely.
So this goes into Naviance?
Yes, this is all done in Navient.
Okay.
Yeah, and what's nice is as students start to do things, they try to make it social media like, so you can like things and favorite things and heart things, and they're always saved in there. So as you get through your freshman, sophomore, junior year, and you're in your senior year, and you're talking about applying to colleges, and you're thinking about, what am I going to major in? Because now they're asking me at 17 years old what I want to do the rest of my life. We go back to some of these things and say, well, here's the things that you've done in the past. Sometimes some of these reassessments or some of these assessments get redone. They can redo it, because how I answered it my freshman year might not be the same as how I'd answer it now as a junior or senior.
Is the product a visual? Or is it?
It's
a
more
narrative? Is
more
it-
text, yeah, narrative.
Is it something that could be? So tell me again, how do the parents access it? They have to access it through Naviance?
Through
They
Naviance.
didn't always have access through Naviance.
Correct.
So when did access through Naviance?
I believe it was just like 2 years ago.
Okay, I'm trying to figure out when it might be 0 for 2. So
You're not alone.
I just think it'd be, yeah, good, so it's for 3 for 3. I think it'd be neat to see that.
I guess that's sort of like, you know, sometimes you have the power school conversation, why don't you open that and show it to me?
Right, right,
So, yeah.
Right.
Good thing we all lived on that together.
right, you sure did. All right.
And I'll double check on the parent access and see what everything you can see from the parent side. But yes, the other way would be is to sit down with your
Yeah,
child.
open your thing. and
Right.
show me.
Yeah, well, and I don't know where the plan is going here, but I'm anticipating that parents might find this helpful to have conversations and be aligned with their child.
Right.
And be supportive of these things, but if they don't know they exist, then we're missing that opportunity.
Right. So we can increase the communication on that, so parents know where to look. In 10th grade, as we move forward, we get into a do what you are, which again leads into more kids self-reflecting into their own personality, and seeing who they are as a person and seeing what kind of careers would match with that type of personality, and then a strength explorer. I think the issue with some of these surveys, they're not always great. It's based on how the student's feeling that day. And again, it's very how they answer the question. Do you like, do you dislike? So they're helpful. I don't know if they're perfect, but they do at least get kids thinking about careers. And they start getting to identify things about themselves that they might be interested in and that they can pursue. And all this leads right into a college major and to a university. So it's all streamlined pretty nicely, that if you do everything in here, you could actually go right into that college search and find a college that has everything that you've done.
Do they go into alternatives to the college path too?
Yes,
Not particularly?
yeah. So when you look at any type of career, it basically breaks it down to how much planning and preparation you have to complete.
Okay.
So with little preparation, here's your set of careers with maybe a less than like a high school diploma here, 2-year degree, 4-year degree, advanced degree, and they have a list of all those. So this is the history of what we've been doing with our students. Larry's going to talk about youth science, which is different than what we've been doing. This is going to start measuring aptitudes, and I don't want to say too much for Larry, but I think we put what their interest is, their strength is, and their aptitude together, we might be able to help students actually pick things a little bit earlier on and maybe more concise with their decision.
Thank you, sir. If you didn't catch it, I'm Larry Calvin. I'm the department chair for Fine and Applied Arts. I think Tom's given you a good outline of the guidance process from Underline High School. I hope you can see that there is a structure there. It's well thought out. It's very intentional in terms of the programming at each of the grade levels. What's not readily apparent until you look at the aggregate results is that there are some shortcomings. And it's in the fact that every choice that results from this is based entirely on student interest and student kind of evaluation. Not that those should be discounted, but when it's the only basis, it's very volatile. It's very unstable. You guys know as adults that our interests change with exposure to things, with our experience. Depending on the experience we have with any given activity, we may have a like or a dislike. Well, the same is true of our teenagers, only it's magnified in that because of their youth, their experiences are even more limited than ours. And it's very difficult, maybe impossible, to express interest in an occupation if I don't know what it is. Tack onto that what Tom said, sometimes the way they answer the questions, depending on the mood they're in that day. There's also some social norms and some stereotypes that influence their likes and dislikes that they may or may not be aware of. And then there's some vocabulary in the test itself. I'll just give you a real quick example. One of the questions asked me to compare whether I like this better or that better. And one of the things is drafting. Well, a lot of our students probably don't even know what drafting is, so they can't even adequately answer that question. Use Science does a lot of the same things that Naviance does in terms of interest. You can see up here, there is an interest profiler, and they do a personal style that's kind of a personality test. But what Use Science leans far more heavily on is the Ball Aptitude Battery, which is put together by the Ball Foundation right here in Glen Ellen. It's based on 50 years of research. They've computerized that aptitude battery. And aptitude is strictly innate talents, things that we kind of have a natural gift for, and we all have those. I'm going to address something right here. Sometimes I've heard people kind of object to that fact. Not telling kids what they can't do. Keep that in mind. This doesn't do anything about telling a student what they can't do. What it does tell them is something they might already have a natural talent for. Have we got any left-handers in here? Did you decide which hand you were going to write with? It just happened naturally, right? I was talking to one of our choir teachers about one of our students that has perfect pitch. That's one of those abilities. And there's all kinds of examples of those. We're not telling students what they can't do, but we're showing them what abilities they already have that may be natural. They may be untrained, but they're there. Use Science does that. And here's where the magic happens is where now, as we do career discovery, they're not just looking into things that they already have an interest in. They're only things they know about. We're showing them things that they might be good at and saying, hey, take a look at this. And if there's an interest, they can look deeper. They can look at the broad career paths within that pathway. They can look at what a day in the life of looks like, what the typical responsibilities are, what the minimum and maximum salaries are, and what the average salary is for that particular position. And then more importantly for us, what the educational pathway is for that position or that career pathway. Let me show you some of the differences that occur when you look at aptitude versus purely interest. This is based on over 100,000 students, public school students, who were given interest and aptitude surveys. And this is the top 50 recommendations. When we look at interest only up here at the top, 80% were recommended artistic and socially related careers. Okay, you can see the arts, entertainment, education, social work, life sciences. Those are great careers, nothing wrong with them, but is that 80% of our students?
That's the majority in this room.
What it is that's what students are aware of. That's what they see every day. That's what they know about those, so they can express interest in those. 0%, when we look at interest in the top 50 recommended, were pointed to the economic in-demand careers of architecture, engineering, IT, construction, manufacturing, transportation, logistics. When we look at aptitude, that changes. 20% still show high aptitude for those artistic and social careers. But now full 54% show an aptitude for the economic in-demand careers. Something else that Use Science does that I wasn't really looking for, but it kind of plays into our role and our mission in terms of equity. If we look at we talked about social stereotypes and gender and racial stereotypes. When you look at our female students, and we talk about interest, only 22% of our female students show an interest in those in-demand, high-tech, high-skill career paths. 3.5 times almost show aptitude for them. Have to wonder what's influencing their interests. Similar thing happens with our students of color. More than 2 times more show an aptitude than show an interest in those high in-demand careers. And then finally, whoops, guess it didn't want me to show you that slide. These are some of the kind of typically male dominated career paths. You got computer technology, manufacturing, construction. You can see when we look at interest, 39%, 40 and 42% of male students show a high interest. Only 12%, 7%, 6% of female students show a high interest. We look at aptitude, a lot different results. And we're not trying to force students into these careers either, but we want to make them aware, hey, you have a talent. You might want to look into this. It's still the student's choice. This is the battery of tests. I know I'm going to go over time, so I'm going to hurry up real quick. This is the battery of aptitude tests that it gives, and these are baseline, guys. This is not, there's a lot of science behind this. There's ongoing science that continue to test to make sure that these are reliable, viable results. And I'm not going to go into all of it, but you can look it up. Look up the ball aptitude battery. It's very, very solid. It tests visual comparison, numerical reasoning, spatial visualization, inductive reasoning, sequential reasoning, idea generation, work approach, time frame orientation. Those are all aptitudes that are accessible. Okay. It also dials in interpersonal style and interest profile, like Naviance does. This is just a quick screenshot of what the student starts to see. It tells every student what their superpower is. These are your top 2 talents. It doesn't compare them with another student. It just tells them, hey, based on your assessment, these are the 2 things you're the most gifted in. And you can dig into that and find out more definition about what that means. It shows them the top career paths, and they can look at it based on aptitude. They can look at it based on interest. And even more powerful, they can look at like a Venn diagram where those intersect. Okay. And they can dial into these careers. And like I said, look at the span of careers in that pathway. Look at the ones that really kind of maybe jazz them up, or they may decide, I'm not interested in any of those. I'll go to a different one that I show an aptitude for. Okay. I don't think I have time to read all this. There's tons of benefits for this. There's benefits at the administration level. We can get aggregate reports on the top careers, top major matches and that are represented in our student body. It might help us inform future course offerings. Which pathways do we need to embellish? Which pathways do we need to design internships for? Those kinds of things. The most powerful thing, I think, is right there. Some of our students come to us, they're very self-aware. They know what their gifts are. We have a whole lot of students that don't. We have a lot of students that have never been told they're good at anything. U-Science tells them, you're good at this. You've got ability here. So they get to know their superpowers. They get a greater sense of self-worth. They get a different kind of a vision of their own personal potential. And where I think the real power is we help them develop the vision for themselves. It creates this intrinsic motivation. They have a different reason for being at school. They have a purpose now. They know they're not asking, why am I here? They know why they're here because they had a vision for themselves now. We've helped them discover that. We plan to implement this starting in the fall. And there was a lot of back and forth about where we could do this. There's a lot of options, but the one that seemed the most readily available, something we could act on and get put in. Jessica's in charge of FAM. I was able to meet with her and her committee. It was planned to have 8 weeks of programming for FAM. We're going to extend that to 11. And 3 of those weeks are going to be dedicated entirely to the student going through the U-Science protocol. The first week is going to happen right away. It's the first full week of school, August 16th. Teachers and FAM are going to help make sure that the student has their account set up. Each student will get an email inviting them to set up an account. But the student will, or excuse me, the teacher will facilitate that, and they'll get them started on those brain games. And that's exactly how U-Science does it. It's a game. You don't have to have a vocabulary or anything. They're playing a computer game. And it takes 10 or 15 minutes for each one of those aptitudes. The second week, we'll skip a week. We'll come back August 30th. And the teachers will facilitate them digesting that information, understanding the results, showing them where to go in and look, showing them how to start discovering careers and doing some career research. And then finally, September 13th, we'll come back and the students can start narrowing down, hey, this pathway looks like the one I want to choose, at least for now. And again, it's not locked in. Students can, just like I didn't declare a major until I was a junior in college and I switched careers 15 years later. They can still do that, but we're giving them a sense of purpose while they're in high school. And if it's based on something they have kind of a natural ability for, it really might be something that has a lot of longevity, but certainly it gives us a better structure for helping them decide kind of what their career, their educational pathway is going to be for now. I mentioned you can look at the educational pathway for those careers. The conversation then with the counselors and the student becomes, what does it make sense to take in high school to prepare you for that post-secondary vision that you just created for yourself? I don't know if you can tell, but I drank the Kool-Aid. I think it's great. With that, I will stop and see if there are any questions.
I have a question.
Yes.
So you've got a plan for freshmen to do this. What if there's a sophomore or a junior who's like, hey, Mr. Calhoun, can I do this? Like, can
Very-
they
very
do it
good
like
question.
just as an individual on
Yes.
their own time?
And I haven't talked to Tom about this. I met with Amy Bradley, who's the representative that we talked to from U Science. She suggested that very thing. We're gonna facilitate it for freshmen. I think with the blessings of the people above me, I think we'll make it available to every student. They just won't have the same level of guidance and understanding. It'll be out there for them, and we'll try to communicate what it's for and what it does.
And then would this still be available? So I'm a freshman this year and I started the first week of my high school experience at MHS. Then does U Science stay with me? Is there other stuff for me to do?
U
as a
Science stays
sophomore,
with you
junior?
for your lifetime. The student
Can
can
we
go back
offer
and
to
look at this.
alumni?
The student can go back and look at this 10 years after graduation. That's another thing that's powerful. Now, I will say this, and the data in U Science, again, it's backed up by a lot of research, shows that those aptitudes that they test, rarely do they change significantly. Interests change all the time. And they recommend you take the interest profile as often as you want to. You can retake the aptitude battery, but what they found is rarely does it change in any significant way.
It's really cool what it showed about girls.
It's an equity
Yeah, it's huge.
must.
Right.
I think all those are true. I think it's a game changer for those students in our school that don't have a clear vision for why they're there. And I mean, you know, it's a great day to be a Mustang, right? I think it'll be an even better day to be a Mustang when we've got more kids with a vision for why they're at school.
I think it serves as a reminder during those tougher times when you're struggling, what you've got within you, right? Because you're saying these are tapping into some natural abilities that you're born with. So I can even see it being incorporated into some of our restorative practices when there's disciplinary actions or when there's consequences.
For kids who are just struggling, you know,
Well,
you've got a junior that's credit deficient, who's, you know, riding that line of which direction am I gonna go, you know, wouldn't that be a nice tool to use?
Yes, yes, and yes. I think those are all true. Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was just saying, another great benefit is we start getting this data from our freshmen and where their aptitudes are. That could help us even decide what kinds of courses to build in the future for our students if the aptitudes are there. That could help us guide some of that as well.
I wasn't gonna have time to this, but I can't resist. ISB just added a career pathway designation to the transcript. We're gonna be one of less than 20 schools that are part of that pilot next year. What that can do for a student, there's only a few colleges involved right now, but it's starting to roll. The one I heard about just recently was NIU. If a student has the minimum requirements to get admitted to the school and has this designation, it's automatic acceptance in the College of Education at NIU. There are scholarships tied to this. There's funding from businesses. If we have a pathway and show that we have a certain number of students getting that pathway designation, we can get grant funding from different industries. There's a lot of significant value to the school in addition to the values for our students.
So what is our status here? Have we signed up already? Are we?
Yes. Oh, I forgot that's the best part. It's free.
Stop.
It's free to us.
Oh.
Tech Campus is our EFE. I can't even remember what that stands for, but they manage the Perkins grant for all of Lake County. And they've used that grant money, at least a portion of it, to purchase U Science for all the 22 consortium schools. Now, all 22 aren't using it, but we're going to use it in a big way. Us and maybe 2 or 3 others are really jumping in with both feet.
So Tech Campus made this available to all 22 schools?
It's my understanding, yes.
I know where you're going.
So,
Sorry.
so then, is that, you said it's for the Perkins grant?
Yes.
So we would expect that to be up in every year.
I think so, yes. They, right now, that's the plan. To be perfectly honest, I think,
Do you know how much it costs per student?
I don't think it's per student. It's actually fairly cost effective. The way they charge for it is actually the reporting piece. Those reports that you can get as an administrator that show the top 10 careers, the CTE match report and all those kinds of things. We pay for the report. The student doesn't, we don't pay anything for the student profile. But that's the part I believe that Tech Campus is paying for. I just got it set up today. The administrators and the counselors will be getting an email to start looking at this. By the way, we can also do our own profile, which is kind of a neat little benefit. And go find out if I was really supposed to be in education.
Could
But, you know,
we,
whatever.
I really want to do it. Can we do it?
I don't know why not. I don't know.
Get him while he's hot.
Yeah. Well, I think it's great. The only caution I would throw out there, I think this is the reality of the day. You can be data rich and action poor, right? So we've got, and I think one of the things that'll be helpful for parents too is to understand the application of this and to see the value behind it, because we've got so many standardized assessments and assessments that sometimes have value and are losing value. And we're going to keep this, we're going to replace it with that. So, or
Peter, I'm glad you said that. I think the key to this being the benefit to our students that we want it to be is the interaction between the teacher and the student as we facilitate that student self-discovery. It's there for the student, but I think without the initial help at least. I mean, after they go through that battery as a freshman, we've walked through it for 3 weeks. The counselors will continue that. But I think without at least that 3 weeks, and this is going to be a reflective process too. At the end of the year, we're going to look at, you know, did it work out the way we wanted it to work out? Is there a different way we should deliver? But we're not just going to let it fall. We're going to make sure that the students are getting whatever assistance and facilitation they need to make this work for them.
And Peter, what you said earlier, I think parent communication that we completed this
Mhm.
and that they could have access to with their student.
this is just about as cool as Kevin Quinn's COVID robot stuff.
Yeah.
Just about,
Just
man, we had a
about.
bet. Come on, give me a little.
Yes, we'll see it in action. Maybe you'll give us a tour.
Got to
All
take
right.
the assessment.
That's right.
Thank you very much for your
Thank
time.
you.
Thanks. Got an idea.
It's just interesting. People are interested in it.
You pull up the academic topics on.
Video games.
So the last two items certainly aren't as fun as what you've been hearing prior to this. I think just listening to all of you, you can hear the excitement and seeing the direction that we're going as a school district and getting that feedback from you. Certainly helping us guide the way we're going. And we're looking at the restorative practices and the U science, and definitely the remote procedures we're putting in place to support our students is what we're about. And you heard that tonight. What we're doing here now is the academic topics is what I'm providing for you as a board is a flexible document. The purpose is to be able to say, here are the main academic topics we will bring to you each month. This list was developed based on your feedback that you provided through the past few years of topics you wanted to hear when you've had that opportunity to discuss it during President's Prerogative. In addition to the topics that we need to address on a monthly basis. So there's going to be certain things in there like in December where that's always the levy. It's a management piece. We have to do that because that determines the amount of money we're going to be able to request for the following year's budget. So that's why that's there. But what I really want to be able to do is say, here's the big topics that we're doing, making sure you see when they're coming. And depending on where we are, you might say, Gavin, we want to get an update maybe earlier on this topic. Can we move this one up to a different month and we can move those around? Or we might come across one and say, you know what, at this time, we'd rather have something that's not even on this list. Something timely comes up. Just think of something crazy. Maybe a pandemic comes around and we got to go and deal with what kind of schedule we'll need. But this is for you as a guide. So please hang on to this. If you haven't printed it out, I'd ask you to please print it out so you have it, so that you know what we're looking to do the following month. Okay? And it's open to suggestions, so it's just a guide. Last item I have then, this is a follow-up, and this is more discussion for you as a board. But the board has the opportunity, if you want to make a recommendation for any type of resolution, that would go to the III conference that's held in November. That's the board conference, and that we are taking steps to get everybody signed up to be able to go forward with. So if there's something as a topic you'd like to have them consider, now's the time we need to have that discussion and be able to put pen to paper and get that submitted by June 23rd. Historically, we haven't submitted anything. We usually take what are brought to us as resolutions and discuss those. So now would be the time, do we want to, does anybody have a proposal or not? Go from there.
Anyone? Proposal or energy for a proposal?
Okay.
All right.
All right, then that would conclude the admin reports for this board meeting then.
Thank you very much. I move to committee and representative appointments. We'll start with the committee appointments. Finance and facilities first. So do you want to jump into that?
So Peter and I are the board representatives for the Finance and Facilities Committee, and we have had a meeting with Andy, and that I think it went really well. I printed off my notes so I could, the meeting minutes, so I could remember all of the details to share with you, and then left that at home. So I will make a few points, and then Peter and Andy, please add anything. We talked, just kind of starting off, what were some of the things that we were interested in hearing about or maybe spending time on. Andy has some specific things he wants to make sure that he gets in front of us as a board. He's going to look to Peter and me to help us kind of time that and put some context around it. So that's one of the roles that we're going to play for him and help assist him in that. There are some things around big picture structural deficits. There are some opportunities that we want to take advantage of. We have some bonds that will be paid off. We want to take advantage of that opportunity to think about how we want to engage the taxpayers, and we possibly have a referendum on the horizon in order to address that. So that was kind of one stream of conversation. Another one was, how do we want to bring the board along in conversations? How do we want to help get data in front of us to help us be informed? We talked about the idea of maybe creating a dashboard that helps us see more visually some of the top numbers that would be helpful. And then also, in addition to that, focus on some topics in order to help the board become more educated and have a deeper understanding of our finances. And then we also talked about, as we move forward, we need to come up with a facilities plan. It's time for us to do some pretty robust facilities planning, and we also have that conversation I just referenced about how we're going to finance such things. One of the things we talked about in the meeting was, how much strategy work does the board want to have us do in order to have those facilities conversations? How much do we feel like we've already done as part of the shared services conversation and the mission vision work that we've done, versus how much do we feel like we still need to do? And so hopefully by our next meeting, we will come to you to help tee that question up, to get guidance from the board on, we feel like we need to do really broad, expansive strategic conversations, and or narrower, we feel like we can move closer. So we'll try to tee that up in a way that you guys have some choice points. Thank you. That's what I recall. What do you want to add?
I think you did a great job.
Yeah, that was good.
Unless you want to get into the finer points of the debt service extension.
We do. I do want to get into that at a future meeting. So we're going to plan to bring that to the table.
Well, we did decide to meet on a monthly basis too. So we're increasing our frequency to kind of stay on target with some of these topics. But also, I think the dashboard is a great idea. Lisa came up with that, where it's going to give us kind of a feedback stream of information and changes in numbers, fluctuations. So we see those be fully informed, so. Some small ideas and some big ideas, and some short-term and some
I like it.
long-term application of it as well. So,
Anything else, Andy?
You did a great job with that. I need printouts.
There we go.
all right, thanks. Representative appointments, anything with CEDAW?
They had a governing board meeting on June 2nd. Someone was kind enough to send me the minutes. They did not know. It was, so I wasn't there. So I can tell you what's in the minutes. if you are interested.
They have a form.
Yeah, they appointed new members, approved a budget.
Regular stuff they do.
Yeah.
June 7th.
Sorry.
It won't be the first time that's.
Okay. No, I felt really bad. Like someone forwarded me the minutes and I was,
Hopefully in that meeting, though, it gave the meetings for the rest, the dates for the rest of the year.
no, but I know who to contact.
Okay, there you go.
Community outreach. We all kind of love it.
So last time we said we weren't really appointing one person. It's
Yeah,
kinda all.
I have more of an opportunity to share some of your connectedness or things you've heard or seen.
Went to a softball banquet the other night.
There you go.
And that Cat McCreary. I want to play Mundelein softball. She's a really motivating person.
Yeah.
Yeah, she was awesome. Yeah, the whole shebang was great, but her speaking about each girl was. Awesome.
I've been to a few baseball games lately. They've been good. Hope that continues tomorrow.
Nice complete game.
It was a complete game. Competitive minutes.
The graduation ceremony, I don't think we've met since then.
Yeah.
Both of them were, I think, quite well received. They were very enjoyable. We made it in time before the weather turned. Some of us were able to make that. It was very well done. So bravo, Anthony.
And I was not there and I heard nothing but great stuff, so.
And the student speakers were fantastic, and their influences have already stretched multiple states. I can tell you that. I've heard things from Nebraska about some of Trey's comments and his messaging, and even saw some follow-up on Twitter about what Trey said. Was able to comment back to that post about he's planting seeds. That's what he's doing. So pretty neat opportunity. And neat to see a lot of people in those stands hearing, seeing what we were able to do in that field. So that was great. A lot of effort. Appreciate it. I just like.
Oh, okay. So, it was a crazy session, this last session. Kevin asked me Kevin, if I don't cover what it was that you really wanted me to cover, I tried to condense everything, and I'm gonna be kind of honing my inner Stacy Gorman to try and not go too long, but it was a very insane session. They passed 654 bills through both houses, and 87% of them happened in the last week. So yeah, it ended on May 31st. They said they think that part of this is because it's response to what we've gone through. There's a lot of new legislators, there's a lot of new leaders, and I will say that one big win is that there was a budget increase of $350 million for the evidence-based funding, which I don't know if you are aware of what that is, but it's an opportunity for different schools to be funded based on certain criteria. And although we will, undoubtedly try again, right, to get some of those dollars, it just goes to the place where they feel like the schools that are doing well and in need. So many of the bills requiring school boards and teachers union responses to the pandemic-like circumstances did not pass, although provisions for measures that can be taken were advanced. For example, a controversial bill was stalled at the last minute that would have established metrics and guidelines for schools if the governor declared a public health emergency. It included penalties for noncompliance. They had a lot of people who sent in something saying they didn't want that. On the other hand, there were provisions approved to increase the availability for several options to recoup lost learning, including incentivizing teachers to teach summer classes, remote learning options, and adjustments to the average student enrollment or ASE with respect to evidence-based funding. You guys have to understand, when I'm reading these things, sometimes the language is so hard. It'll say something like prohibits the prohibiting of the non-entity of not doing, I mean, it's like so many backwards words, you have to kind of piece it apart to figure out what exactly happened. So if I am sounding wordy, it's because they're wordy. There was a strong response to issues of social equity, and here are a few of the bills that passed both houses. AP fees will be reduced for any student who qualifies for free and reduced lunch for the testing. Uniform codes and policies may not include any reference to hairstyles and requires modification to athletic or team uniforms to include cultural and religious values. Menstrual products will now be available in both bathrooms. Students are to be excused from physical activity if fasting for religious purposes. Allows high schools to include, it doesn't mean it requires, to include a unit of instruction on naturalization, the path to US citizenship, and including what will be on the test. So that's an option. Some very progressive measures were also passed, including allowing public high schools to include a unit on media literacy, a requirement for schools to develop a plan for unused food sharing focused on needy students. So the requirement is to create a plan. Okay, removing the mandate to teach sex ed, but if a school chooses to continue teaching sex ed, there are certain curriculum requirements, including a new one to teach about sexting. Schools are required to provide National Suicide Prevention Lifeline contact info on the back of student IDs or on its website, which I kind of like. Requirement for schools to provide supports to students who are parents, expecting, or victims of abuse. And school boards must adopt policies, that's us, related to absences and or missed homework as a result of pregnancy. Some stuff about school violence. I wanted to read this specific thing about lockdowns that it says here. The new bill prohibits law enforcement lockdown drills from including simulations that mimic an actual shooting incident or an active shooter event. All lockdown drills must be announced in advance to all school personnel and students prior to commencement. Drill content must be age appropriate and developmentally appropriate, and lockdown drills must include and involve school personnel, including mental health professionals. School must also provide sufficient information and notification to parents and guardians in advance of any lockdown drill that involves participation of students and an opportunity for parents and guardians to exempt their child. So I find that really, I mean, that's pretty comprehensive and all-inclusive and kind of cracking down. There's a new unfunded mandate requiring schools to report all data on the number of incidents of violence on school grounds or at any school activity that result in suspension, expulsion, and or removal of student to an alternate school. The Child Task Force will be recommending ways to prevent learning loss during expulsions and suspensions. Special ed students who turn 22 during the school year will now be allowed to complete the school year. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that 22 thing. And if a student goes into transition, what it's been is they turn 22 and the day before they turn 22, they kind of have a conference about, okay, here's all the stuff that you're going to need for your life and bye-bye. And it's in the middle of the school year and it's kind of, anyway. It also, there's another one that changes the timeout and restraint language, including prohibiting prone restraint. So some new stuff there. And finally, there is a measure that's to address the teacher shortage, allowing retiring teachers to return to teaching with no penalty until June 30th of 2024. So, Kevin, did I get what you wanted me to
You
get?
hit it all.
Okay.
That's a good job.
Okay. All right, so And I would say refer to your stuff, but you'll never be able to get through it.
Define summary.
Yeah. Now we might come up with some ideas that we would want, hearing some of this stuff, maybe it would get your mind thinking of something that we would want to. So,
All right, moving on to board action. items. So I have a statement to read. We request that if a board member would like an item to be removed and or tabled for further discussion, now is the time to communicate the request. I need a motion for a roll call on the items listed below.
second,
Wait, I'm not sure what.
yeah.
Are we voting on that?
So you need to go to recommendation sheet. We're gonna do the recommendations to approve the amended 2021 budget.
Mhm.
I'm gonna read this. Yes, sir.
Yes.
Yeah, so we're just moving to each individual.
Right.
So the recommended motion is that the Board of Education of Mundelein High School District 120 accept the superintendent's recommendation to adopt fiscal year 2020-2021 amended budget as presented.
Second, Fontaine,
Yes.
Yaffe, yes. Mellon,
Yes.
Australia,
Yes.
Becky, yes.
And the second recommended motion is that the Board of Education of Mundelein High School District 120 accept the superintendent's recommendation to approve the job descriptions as presented.
Want to be able to note that that does not include the interventions.
Not including the interventions.
So moved.
Mellon,
Yes.
Becky. Yes. Yaffe, yes. Fontaine,
Yes.
Australia.
Yes. Third recommended motion is for the approval of federal grant application. That the Board of Education of Mundelein High School District 120 accept the superintendent's recommendation to approve the consolidated district plan for the fiscal year 2021-2022 as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Mellon,
Yes.
Fontaine,
Yes.
Australia,
Yes.
Becky,
Yes.
Yaffe, yes.
Now we need the Board of Education meeting we need a motion. The Board of Education meeting to adjourn. Enter into executive session at 8:45.
So moved.
You have to read why we're, what
Yeah.
exception?
Oh, for the 2.7,
The-
yes,
there
the
we go.
executive session. The appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees of the public body or legal counsel for the public body, including hearing testimony on a complaint lodged against an employee of the public body or against legal counsel for the public body to determine its validity.
So moved. Oh, shit. Took a big pause.
I've got also the discussion of minutes of meetings lawfully closed under the Open Meetings Act, whether for purpose of approval by the body of the minutes or semi-annual review of the minutes as mandated by section 2.06.5 ILCS 120/2C21.
So moved.
Mellon,
Yes.
Becky,
Yes.
Yaffe, yes. Fontaine,
Yes.
Australia.
Yes. Looking to see if we're.
Pardon?
We need one today?
Yes.
We do.
We're off first.
Yep, gonna confirm all sleep time and then
Board of Education will now come to order at 9:10. Secretary, please call the roll.
Mellon,
Yes.
Fontaine,
Yes.
Australia,
Yes.
Becky,
Yes.
absent, Yaffe here. Vote Absent.
Yes, here. Action may be taken as a result of the executive session. I think we can do it all in favor of this, right?
The minutes, yes.
Of the minutes, so we'll do the first minutes for the executive session. First reading.
Lisa, were you voting?
I'll be abstaining.
So you need to do two separate, well, you can still do it. You still have a majority.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstain?
Abstain.
Motion passes. The action to be taken with regards to fiscal year 21 compensation for administration and confidential employees. We have a roll. We have to have a motion for that.
Roll.
Roll.
That means
I go through
I need motion, don't I?
Yes. We need a motion.
a motion first. A motion for the,
The compensation for administration.
So moved.
Yes.
so moved.
Second.
Roll.
Mr. Mellon? Humzike,
Yes.
Mellon. Yes. Mr. Lee,
Yes.
Becky? Yes. Yaffe, yes.
A motion for the amendments in the superintendent's contract.
So moved.
Second.
Mellon? Yes. Mr. Lee,
Yes.
Becky? Yes. Yaffe, yes. Humzike.
Yes. President's prerogative.
It's you.
I know.
It's your prerogative. You have anything?
I don't have anything though. I did talk to Laura. And that's what we said. Go to the meeting. And get to the next one. Thanks for supporting me as we go through this.
You made it.
All right. If there's no further business before, or to come before the board, the meeting should adjourn if we have a motion.
So moved. Second. Mellon? Yes. Becky? Yes. Yaffe, yes. Humzike?
Yes.
Mr. Lee?
Yes, 9:13.
All right.
There you go.